You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Hi, this is Lady C.
And this is JT.
Welcome to The Critical Thought. In the upcoming segment, we're going to be talking to Jake from the YouTube channel, Alt+Worldly, and we're going to be talking all about Jehovah's Witness topics and everything under the sun. So, Jake, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're
Hey,
so
man,
welcome.
glad to have you on. So, Jake, we're glad to have you on the show because you do what we do, and that is you help people to be able to better understand the Jehovah's Witness religion. And I guess it's good because we know there's so many different content creators, and as often says, people are in different lanes covering different subject matters, and this is what makes it so good because we're actually able to cover the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses from literally every angle, which allows people to see in the different facets of this religious organization. And so we wanted to have the opportunity for our audience to get to know a little bit about you, how you got involved, how you woke up, and really, why did you decide to literally take time out of your schedule and go back and start actually doing videos, doing activism to help other people. And so today we look forward to you sharing some of those experiences with us.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. I guess the best place we can start is right from the very beginning. Could you just give us, as we often say, the elevator pitch of how you or your family got involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses?
My family goes back about 4 generations in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I couldn't even really tell you how they first came in. It was when I was born in, and my parents and my grandparents were born in. So it was just sort of like joining the family business in a way. There was no world in which I was not going to join. And it didn't feel weird because I had a big family, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins who were all really like fun people. So it just felt like the most natural thing in the world to me. I never had to really convince myself of anything. It just was my world from the time I was born, and for my parents and grandparents the same way. So that's how I came into it, and that's how like everybody I knew came into it too.
Yeah, that is a way in which people simply just accept it. Everybody around you doing it, then you know this is what you have to do. And so all those years that you were in, let me ask you this though. Did you ever, as you sat in meetings, you heard talks, did something ever register like this don't make no sense? Was there ever any part for you that you went through that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like all of us, I went on that ultimate big journey that led me here, but I did go through just little doubts along the way. And the way I've like talked about this and trying to describe it, because I'm sure like you guys, you look back on your experience and you realize that this was the product of a lot of little things that added up over time. So for me, but I never would have characterized them as doubts. Like, I wonder if this is really the truth. It didn't really register in my brain like that. So I've described it as like having a crack in the windshield of your car, and you kind of know it's there, but then it just becomes part of the scenery and you forget about it. And then all of a sudden, one day you look and that crack is, going all the way across your windshield. I do think that the biggest thing that I noticed from a young age was how we got a lot from a little. So like we would get a lot of information and extrapolation from just a very small Bible verse. Like I really had a hard time being in the book study as a kid, reading the Revelation book and understanding how we got the idea that the United Nations was somehow going to be involved in Bible prophecy just by reading a couple verses that in no way mentioned that. For example, like we would get a lot of information from just a little bit of the Bible. And you guys talk about this in your videos, but it's kind of that thing that Watchtower does of, well, we know this is true and it's reasonable to assume X, Y, and Z, and perhaps this happened. And so they use all of these little qualifiers based on assumptions until they've built this crazy Jenga tower. And so I did notice little things like that. I kind of recognized like, well, we are making a lot of assumptions, but you don't really want to allow your brain to go down that road too much, because you know that if you question one thing, then you're not allowed to believe any of it. And you want all the paradise stuff to be true. So why would you bother questioning? So I did have a lot of little things, but it took a long time before I really allowed them to register in my brain as actual doubts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. In fact, you made two very outstanding points that I think that we need to stop and think about. You said it becomes like a crack in the window, and you're right. We have this company that does they do windows, and that's one of the little things they talk about. You get that little crack, call us as soon as you can, because if you don't, the line will go across. And that's the way it is in the organization. The minute that you get that crack, the organization comes in and starts trying to address that, because they know if they don't, it will go across. Because as you start to question one thing, you will continue to question another thing. You're like my sister. My sister was just like you. And I remember so many times my sister, she would say, "Mama, this just don't make no sense." And that's right. Because the Watchtower could take one scripture, have like 8, 9 little words in it, and they would build, like you said, they would literally build a whole superstructure for a teaching. And if you were to ask them to prove it, they couldn't. And that is one of the things that we now, as we all of us look back, we often wonder. And I think about myself. I mean, how did they take one scripture? Like the faithful and discreet slave. Jesus was just talking to people of illustration, and they took, and it was really a question. He never gave the answer. It was just a question, and they took a question and converted it into an entire teaching of the faith from a question.
That's something that did bother me, because they will say, Jesus prophesied about a faithful and discreet slave. And then the scripture they cite points you to a scripture that says, who is the faithful and discreet slave? And then he doesn't say. So it's like, okay, well, you can't answer a question with a question. And it doesn't really work. Yeah. But I think the thing that's tricky about it is that every doubt that you have, it goes back to a failure on your part to be patient or to apply yourself, or you're being overly critical, as much as it's painted as like this really nice doctrine where, yes, we were imperfect and we're in Satan's world, so you can't blame yourself too much. But when it comes to like failures in your spirituality, those all go back to that's your fault. Maybe you're not reading your Bible enough. Maybe maybe you are going to all the meetings, but are you participating? Are you getting there early? Are you staying late? Blah, blah, blah. So there's always some reason why it's probably your fault. So there definitely isn't a problem with the teaching.
Yeah. So Jake, how long have you been woke?
That's a good question. I guess probably 2 years. But a year of that was spent, kind of like in the closet, so to speak, not telling anybody about it and trying to make sense of my own feelings and making a game plan and what I was going to do. And even beyond that, I started to really have questions in 2018. And obviously you start thinking back in your journey and you realize, I guess I had issues for a long time that I just wasn't addressing. But the thing that really started to push the snowball down the hill and gather into this gigantic boulder was in 2018, I want to say it was May or something, Garrett Loesch did the broadcast, and I was a servant at the time. So I was the goody two shoes who would show the broadcast at the Kingdom Hall for the older people who could not, play the broadcast in their home or something. So I was showing it at the Kingdom Hall and feeling pretty good about myself. And Garrett Loesch gives this talk where he talks about, well, what if we hear about rumors about the governing body or branch committee members? There have been things that have gone around on YouTube or Twitter that have concerned some people. So what should we do if we see that? And of course, I'm sitting forward in my seat because I'm like, I've always wondered what they're saying. And we never say what they're saying. We just say not to listen to it. And he says, if we see these things, we shouldn't spread it around to anyone else and undermine their faith. And these things are often taken out of context, and Jehovah trusts the imperfect slave. So shouldn't we trust the imperfect slave as well? And that like really upset me because he completely avoided what these apparent criticisms were. He said that there were quotes and videos of people. So now I'm aware that there's information out there that I don't know about. And I know that I'm afraid to look it up. And also, it's hitting me that the governing body are the folks who write these scripts for the broadcast. And he's telling me, hey, through this invisible process, God trusts me. So you should also trust me. And I had just never thought about it in those terms. And for the next like year and a half, I was just in a pretty miserable state of like, something doesn't feel right, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And it took me a while to accept that I just don't believe it anymore. And I reached that conclusion just by reading Watchtower publications, by the way. I just tried to encourage myself and do what you're supposed to do. I spent seemingly all of my free time trying to do research and to fortify my beliefs and restore the love that I had at first. And the more I was reading it, the more I started to realize how manipulative the wording was, and the less and less it was clicking with me.
Yeah, that is a ma'am, tell you, that is a technique that the organization employs. In fact, that was one of the things that my wife and I, we learned after we left this organization. We went back to college because we wanted to understand how this thing worked, and we took psychology. And that was one of the things that they taught us, is how people, they try to make a correlation. And once people make a correlation, they can get you to do anything. So if God trusts us, then you should trust us. And because you may love God, you have a great, well, if God trusts me, then it got to be okay. And that's kind of like a reference. If you're hiring someone, that's why you ask for references. Do you trust this person? Yeah, well, then he's a good man, a good woman. Now I can trust him. And that's a technique that they use. And it is, like you said, it is very, very effective, because one of the things that he did not do, and I've heard so many people bring the same issue up. There are rumors, people are saying stuff, but they never tell you, well, what did they say?
Mm-hmm.
And was it what they said? Was it true, or was it not true, or what? And so you never know what it is. And like you mentioned, and so because you are taught not to look to see, then you realize what the problem is. And man, when you start looking, you realize, oh, this is what they didn't want us to read. This is what they want us to read.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I cut you off, ladies?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I said right. No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. You guys are rolling.
I just want to make sure. Yeah, because I think that one of the things that was really disturbing me as I was trying to do research was, what are the criticisms against us, so that I know that they're false? And I was trying to find articles written about like apostasy and stuff, so that I could, fortify my faith against whatever these false allegations were. But what I found was they really don't talk about apostasy that often. And when they do, it's always in vague terms. And it's always in this sense of, they're saying stuff that is so poisonous that if you read it, it will instantly deteriorate your faith. So stay away from it. And, in the meantime, I like YouTube a lot as just a platform. I watched a lot of YouTube videos at the time. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of the things that I liked to watch were like rebuttals. I liked to watch people break down like conspiracy theories, like flat earth stuff, for example. And I never saw a video where a person who thought the earth was a sphere said, what flat earthers are saying is so dangerous. Don't look at it at all. It's fake. It's crazy. Don't look at it. Obviously what they do is they take exactly what the flat earthers are saying and they break down why it's not true. And I would just wonder, like, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we just address what they're saying and break down why it's wrong? So that was really bothering me. And I think what really started to freak me out was realizing how afraid I was and how much fear was used as a tactic in the organization. One of the videos that was shown at a convention around that time showed, it was from the point of view of a family who had lost their son, who had disassociated. But it had never clicked with me before this point that you can't just disassociate. It's, kind of the way it's announced in the organization is it's announced just like a disfellowship person. But I didn't know that. So as this video is playing at the convention, I'm whipping out my OD book and flipping through the pages and finding like, yep, if somebody writes a letter saying they don't want to be a witness, we treat them the same as a disfellowship person. And that's when I realized, like, I can't leave. I can't ever change my mind about any of this because then I would lose my family. And I don't think it had really struck me that disfellowshipping was a fear tactic until I realized that I have some issues with some teachings, but I'm not allowed to do anything about it. And I'm afraid to research those things because what's the benefit of that? And I remember specifically, and by the way, I'm rambling on a lot, so let me know if I go on for too long. But I remember seeing just somebody tweet one time something about the Bible that I had been wondering about. And what they said in this tweet made sense. And I thought to myself, well, I'm afraid to look in to see if they're right, because if they're right, that means that my translation of the Bible is wrong. And that means that I don't have the truth. And that means that I can't, the best case scenario here is that, yeah, they're right, but then I lose my faith in my own religion. So I was just starting to become really aware of how afraid I was of any outside information, even about biblical things, which supposedly we really care about as witnesses. So yeah, the fear thing really started to weigh on my mind.
Yeah. Lady C and I, that was one of the things that just kept popping up in our conversations. Apostate material. Apostate material. And when I first went online, there were a lot of elders online. A lot of circuit overseers were online. We even had Bethelites online. This is before they had a crackdown where they would take your stripes if you got caught online in these chat forums. And so you would have people who were current elders and people who were former elders. And I remember I was still an elder, and I would go in and I was challenging these guys who were former elders. And every time we get into these discussions, these guys, they be quoting, JT, look up this when you could go to the Kingdom Hall, go into the congregation file, you the secretary, and look this up, this letter dated so and so, so and so. And so there was this constant, I'm looking at the society stuff. Now, where's the apostate material? Tell me something y'all guys wrote. And the problem was, man, it just kept popping up. It was always something the society published. Mm-hmm. It's just all of a sudden you're now able to put it in a context. And you begin to realize, man, there ain't really that much apostate material written. It's mostly stuff y'all wrote that was wrong and y'all claimed it was right. And then you want to throw it away.
You also have to remember that when you look at the apostate stuff, depending on when you left the organization, let's say you were a person that was associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, and then you came back, some of the stuff that they taught would be considered an apostate. Because remember, the new light, things changing and stuff like that. And of course, we're not talking about it from that vein, but that goes back to what we were talking about before we started the recording of this episode, where we talked about how the changes have come about in the religion, So what when you look at that, Jake, what changes have you seen throughout your involvement with the group?
It is kind of crazy. I just turned 30 and I left when I was 28, I think. At least I started to fade at that point. So in all that time, it is kind of crazy how much changed, multiple different songbooks, multiple different formats for the book study and everything, and the ministry school and the meetings. But I think the most significant change, and the one that has done the most, like simultaneously the most damage and has helped them the most, is the switch to videos and primarily using those as a source of teaching. Instead of doing demonstrations and interviews from the platform, like on a stage, and just interviewing people in the local area, now they have these highly produced videos with music and stuff. And the reason why I say it's damaging, of course, is because prior to like 2013, when they released that revision of the New World Translation, it would have been quite a feat to be able to name all the governing body members. I remember that was like a game we would play out in service sometime. Like, how many governing body members' names do you know? And now, like, if you're a witness and you can't name all the governing body members, you're basically like an apostate, because the governing body members are on your TV all the time. And I think at first it was very exciting because it felt like, good, more transparency. And that was something that I was worried about. And I was especially I don't know why, but I was bothered by the fact that like we didn't have access to morning worship talks. And I liked that they were releasing some on the website. So it was all very exciting. But I think what you started to see is that the stuff that you might have dismissed as little quirks in your local congregation, you realize were actually systemic issues in the organization in general. Like I always had issues with some of the lazy teaching in the organization and how, brothers would give talks and just make kind of crazy statements like Jehovah's Witnesses are the only people that smile. And, that's not true. That's a crazy thing to say. And you would be like, oh, boy, I hope there's no Bible studies here because this brother just gave a crazy illustration that makes no sense. But it's easy to dismiss because the people giving the talks. And you're like, well, that's just Jeff. He works at the auto mechanic shop. I know that he's not perfect. He's just doing his best. But when you start to see this stuff from the teaching committee, you realize that maybe the teachings themselves just don't have anything to back them up. Maybe there's just no meat on those bones at all. And I think that has been the biggest change that has had a big impact. Like a lot of people from my generation and who are currently leaving, it seems like the video stuff was really instrumental in them leaving, but it was also instrumental in keeping them in as long as they were in, because they're very effective in terms of manipulation. They can add soulful piano music behind these interviews and zoom in on people's tears. They can really make it a big production. And, but at the same time, I think once you start to wonder, like, is this maybe being a little manipulative? You're able to really see it for what it is, which is propaganda. So I think that's the most important change.
Yeah, the videos have been very effective. And then on the other hand, as you said, people get a chance to see these are the guys that are in charge. And that has been, for me, see, like you said, at one time you had the mystique, but now people are like, I mean, and people we've had that conversation. People are like, man, I didn't know these were the guys who are running the show. Yeah, those are the guys, man. That's it. And so, you can try to hide behind Moses and Aaron and all you want to, but we live in a world where people understand this guy ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer. I can see this right here. I mean, I can see this. And so, right. And so all of a sudden you realize that this mystique that they've used for years, the governing body, the faithful slave, you get this, you think of Moses coming down, or you think of the Wizard of Oz, and all of a sudden the curtain is pulled back and this little tiny man is running the whole show. and so right. People now see who people, and see when you start moving around the world, see, that's the whole thing. See, everybody, we tend to do everything from the Western perspective. United States, yes. Canada, England. But when you start moving down into South and Latin America, moving into Africa, moving into the Asia, they're like, you got to be kidding me. And so we've had these conversations. And so when people see this and they show their neighbors or their Bibles to, and they're like, you follow this guy here? You follow this guy? And what can the witness say? Yeah, I'm following him.
Right.
And he's talking crazy.
Right. But what I'd like to say, just to go back to double click on what Jake said earlier about the change. You talked about the videos being changes and stuff like that. But you know what I find? I remember when my family was getting involved with this religion and how we had certain terms that we would use. I mean, I go back to the green Bible and the pink songbook. And, then I also, when we were witnesses, the head elder was called the presiding overseer. Mm-hmm. Now he's called the coordinating body of elders, the COB, the COBE. Then you got it used to be district convention. Now it's regional convention. It's now the silver sword, So I feel like people can measure where you are when they talk to you. This kind of makes you stand out like a sore thumb. Anyone in the year 2022 that would come to the Kingdom Hall with a green Bible, well, now a black Bible, black Bible now, they would be looked at as they're not keeping up.
They're not keeping up with the chariot.
Right. Yeah. And so if you come in there talking about, I'm going to the district convention, presiding overseer, and then even people have told us about our channel. And they said, will you please stop saying the society? Because in our day, we called it the society, Watchtower society. They don't use that term anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
So people can kind of see
the branch,
where you are.
The branch or the organization.
Exactly. So
the earthly part of Jehovah's
changes.
Spiritual paradise.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are some of the changes that I've seen throughout the years. Yeah.
We had someone who told us this. So they went to the Kingdom Hall, and they was kind of trying to come in and fake it a little bit, and they went up to one of the attendants. You got any extra song books up in the closet? I can song book.
It's on the screen, man. What you doing?
I just on the screen.
Yeah.
We use iPads. We use tablets here.
We use iPads now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
He said his cover was blown, man. He said my cover was blown, basically.
But you know what? That's the reason why a lot of people would watch certain channels on the internet. And there were certain YouTubers that were giving people a play-by-play of what the latest was going on in the organization. And then people who were trying to fade, they would tune into those channels because they were able to keep up with the Watchtower.
Yes, indeed.
That's what I did when I was, I wasn't tuning in.
To be able to make their way through getting out of this organization at their own pace, which was, I think, that was good. That was good.
You know what's funny though, Lady C, about that is like we would say that as witnesses. And I remember there was specifically like a demo that was done. I think it was on a weekly meeting, but it was a part that was done around the time of the memorial, trying to encourage inactive people to come to the memorial, right? And so that, because there's always a big push around that time. Can we get some inactive people to come to the memorial at least? And it was kind of the joke of the demo was like, yeah, I've got my songbook. And they're like, we've got a new songbook. And like, I've got my Bible. And they're like, but we've got a new Bible. And we would say as witnesses, like, people, if you left the organization 20 years ago, it's a different organization now. It's so much more reasonable. It's so much kinder. It's more about practical application. And I remember thinking that's not such a brag, like, we have to be so mean and we're nice now. It's like, that's not super encouraging to think about. Like, you were justified in leaving. We used to be really mean, but now we're nice. You should come back. But it's something that we recognize when we're in as a thing that's happening, but we see it as like, look at the light getting brighter. The language in the publications used to be so much harsher, and now it's not. Now it's just so simple. There's not all these crazy prophecies, except when there are, and there's not all these types and antitypes except when we need them. There's all these exceptions, of course, but it's something that people recognize. You see it as a good thing because you're taught that, like, the fact that things are changing means that things are moving forward, when in reality, it's like, what is it? It's swapping out like deck panels on the Titanic. It's just like you're rearranging furniture, but you're not actually moving forward and becoming more progressive.
Yeah, because actually that goes to the heart and soul of the whole concept that we said we stood for. And that is, we were teaching the truth. And so we're now the witness, the general, and that mindset is the witness is happy now that they can do this. And I've had this conversation with people, and they never stop to think. That's why we really call our channel Critical Thinkers, because that was what got us all in trouble. We never stopped to think critically. When the organization changes something from A to B, we celebrate the B, but we fail to recognize what did it mean when we were at the A, especially in view of the fact that we're talking about quote unquote teachings of God. And that brings up the question, well, now what about B? Because that's really what we have. You as you go all the way back to Russell and Rutherford, they had a teaching that time. They changed the teaching this time, and this teaching in Rutherford, Noor, and Nathan, and then on the friends. And they're constantly changing like bouncing balls. And we're at no point have we recognized y'all been snow jobbing us for 100 years. If what you're saying is I just got the truth on this subject today, what was I teaching for the last 85 years?
Exactly. If you had taught B yesterday, you would have been considered an apostate.
That's exactly
now B is
right.
true. And if you teach an A, then you're falling behind. But it's like you can't run ahead. You can't run ahead of and that's always that's something that really confuses me, because
well,
it's
you
like,
know what? I think I'm going to say this. This is the way I look at this. Okay, think about this. Think about the Watchtower as being the teachings that they had were tragic. And they had bad consequences for the people. Now, if you think about an airplane that crashes and all you hear is it was American Airlines flight, whatever, crash, killed 300 people. And they never show you their faces. They never tell you their names of the people who died in this crash or were affected by it. Those people, they don't really resonate. You don't really look at them as tragedy because you don't really see them. You don't know who they are. The same thing is true with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like they'll talk about, we don't teach that anymore, but they don't give you the faces of the people, the names of the people, and the families that suffered the consequences from the teachings. And I think that's why it's so easy for them to do that and to say these things.
Yes. Because
they don't really humanize the people that were actually affected by their teaching,
Yeah. That's an excellent point. I just had a discussion with someone just a couple of days. Someone shot something back to me, and I shot it back to them. I said, I want you to think about this. The Watchtower, and I tell you all the time, I'm a firm believer, give credit where credit is due. And then when someone goes off the rails, you got to hold their feet to the fire. The Watchtower writes some very good articles, some of the best written articles. And I challenge anyone, go and look up some of the articles that the Watchtower has written using the Bible on why a Christian should apologize when he has done someone wrong. Some of the best written articles in the world. Yet, as my wife and I, we often, end up laughing about, they never apply to themselves.
No.
When you consider you wrote something in your magazine that for those who follow it, they lost family members. They lost family members. I didn't get a transplant. The doctor said they had a kidney downstairs in the cooler, but I couldn't take it because the Bible says not to. And then 2 days later, I get a magazine after my child is dead. I could have took it. The Watchtower doesn't say, brothers, we're so sorry. For those of you who follow our instructions and our directions, brother, we apologize. For those families that have been hurt, brothers, we're sorry. Yet you read the articles, they can have you can just not speak to somebody in field service and they're telling you that you need to apologize. And yet they put somebody in a grave and they can't apologize. And so this is the hypocrisy in this organization. They can tell others how to do things, and they will be correct in what they say many times. I don't have to live by it. It kind of reminds you, and this is a joke here in Washington, D.C., and people talk about all the time in places as well, but how people in Congress, they'll pass laws for everybody else in the country.
Sure,
and
yeah.
Sometimes those laws, and I didn't know this, many times the laws that they pass, they don't have to live by them. They do not apply to members of Congress. So there are actually certain laws that they don't have to really apply because they get exempted. They have all kinds of government policies and so forth. And this is for the regular folks. This is it. And so that's what the organization does all the time. The organization is quick to tell you to apologize, be forgiven, yet they themselves, man. I mean, I have never seen the Watchtower apologize for teaching people doctrines that led to people's loss of their life. And the reason why, because the legal department says we can't do that because Jehovah is not going to protect the money in court. You would think that they would say, we're going to make this statement publicly because we were wrong, and our God, Jehovah, is going to protect us in the court system. Because as the president of Watchtower said, when the money runs out, then we know it's time for Jehovah wants to close shop. So this is the kind of organization that we are a part of. There are two sides of it. And for people like yourself and my wife and I and so many other people, once you start seeing the other side, after a while, you're like, I can't do this. This is foolish. This is crazy.
This is so true. Now, Jake, see, you were one of the individuals amongst thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, no doubt waking up right now. But not only did you wake up, but you decided to come out as an activist. Is there any particular reason why you chose to be an activist?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of I generally just tend to call myself a content creator because I try to kind of keep the videos light and kind of try to be funny with it, not making fun of witnesses, but just kind of having a light sensibility about it. The reason being is I think that like humor is a good like BS detector. Like if you can get somebody to laugh in spite of themselves, then I think that a part of them realizes that it's true. And that's kind of what I try and do on the channel. And that was kind of part of my waking up process, was watching stuff on other cults and laughing, but then realizing like, oh wait, but that's what I do. So in general, I wanted to do it for that reason. The thing that was the original impetus for me wanting to make content on YouTube was really just because I wanted to do it anyway. I was already like wanting to maybe do something on YouTube because I really liked it as a platform. But I really didn't feel like I was an expert on anything. And then when I woke up, I was like, oh, I know what I know a lot about and have put hundreds of hours of research into. The biggest thing was like, I felt like I had no voice anymore. I felt like I was in a position where I didn't have any outlet for how I felt about anything. So originally, like I started a website when I kind of first woke up, because one of the things that I was really disturbed by and that really got the ball rolling on my waking up process were the frequently asked questions articles on jw.org. I was looking at these to try and encourage myself as somebody who was having severe doubts, because I thought, well, this is like the basics, and this is meant for people who are just seeing a QR code for the website on a literature card. So it's supposed to be very simple. But I would read them and realize that they just simply were not true. Like one of the frequently asked questions articles was, do Jehovah's Witnesses break up families or build them up? And it doesn't mention disfellowshipping once in the article. And I remember thinking like, well, the reason why people think that witnesses break up families is because of the disfellowshipping arrangement. So the fact that they're not mentioning it is a little troubling. So I started a website called jwfaq.com, which specifically like breaks down the frequently asked questions articles on jw.org. And I really liked doing that. But I was also like really specifically trying to keep it like really, it's like fact-based. Like, here is what the website says. Here is what the Watchtower says. And these things conflict with each other. But I wanted to do something that was more personable and more my voice, and that sounded more like conversational. So I started doing some videos without my face on them because I was still PMO at the time. And yeah, I went back to that thing of like, once you wake up and you are maybe in a family with a bunch of witnesses or whatever your circumstance is, you realize that you're trapped, and that's a terrible feeling. And the other thing you want to do is tell everybody about all this stuff that you've been reading about. When you go down the rabbit hole and you start waking up and you're listening to YouTube videos, you're reading a bunch of books about like cult mentality and stuff, and you want some kind of outlet for it, and you don't have it necessarily unless you're posting online or whatever. And so I wanted to do that. I had always, as a witness, wanted to be a performer of some kind, like I do like acting or like stand up or just something. So I felt like, well, this will be an outlet for that, and it'll satisfy this desire to like talk about witness stuff and my own selfish desire to hear myself talk. Just all these things, it was all come together. So I think it all came from that, but it also like, I wanted to make the kinds of videos that I liked to watch. And I felt like there was a gap in that area in the XJW scene. Not that I wasn't enjoying watching stuff, but there wasn't anything like in the style specifically of like millennial YouTubers my age. And I liked that kind of style, and I wanted to kind of try and do XJW content in that style. That was like 19 different things.
Yeah. I mean, you unloaded so much on us. That's true. But man, let me ask you this, because that's a very important thing about when you decide. See, some people, they leave and they just leave and go on. You decide to put your face out. What was it like knowing that you came from literally an entire witness community in your family, knowing that there was a possibility that you would literally lose everybody. I mean, what was that like? I mean, we know people who they were the only person in their family that's a witness. Nobody. You know, they studied for 6 months, came in, and like, this is crazy. And they get out 2 years later, they're gone. And their family's like, oh, don't worry about it. You know, we went to Woodstock and we was doing this when we was kids, so and young and foolish. So that she was just having some fun. That's all. But when you are raising a family like you are, where uncles and cousins and 3 and 4 levels deep, what was it like, man? I mean,
yeah, well, I think it kind of goes back to the fear thing, because when I started doing it, I wasn't showing my face because obviously I was afraid of the consequences. I knew that the one truly like unforgivable, unbreakable rule is speaking out against the organization. Worse than, infidelity or murder, even, people get the organization in prison all the time. But if you speak out against the organization, then that's it. So I did it from behind a pseudonym and without my face, because I really wanted to try and help people. And once you start getting messages that like people find your stuff helpful, then that motivates you to do it even more, right? Because you still have that desire that you had as a witness to help people and to try and preach the truth in some way. But you realize that your sense of the truth was all out of whack. So I was feeling really good about that. But at the same time, I was like, my 6-year-old cousin has some little YouTube channel where he plays with his Lego toys. He's not afraid to show his face on the internet, but I am. And it kind of went back to that fear thing of I'm afraid to show my face on the internet in the year 2019 or 2020 or whenever it was. And, meanwhile, every young person is doing that all the time, whether it's on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. So I really started to be kind of haunted by this thought of like, do my parents really not love me more than a YouTube channel? Like, would they really stop talking to me because I said something on YouTube that they disagreed with? And then that just became this thought that was just constantly in my head. And I think even though I knew that I would be shunned, a part of me did kind of hope like, well, maybe it'll shake them out of it a little bit and it'll get them to think. And I think I needed to see for myself, like, yes, love in the organization really is that shallow. They don't think it's shallow, and it's not their fault because it's a brainwashing tactic. But I needed to see, like, are my parents really going to shun me over a YouTube video? Is that really as far as their outward affection for me is able to go? So I kind of hit a point where I felt like I needed to show my face on YouTube because I needed to see, like, is this really what this organization does to people? And of course it was found the day after I posted it and spread around to my family immediately. And immediately I was shunned. And around the same time I was going through health issues, and I was in the hospital. Like, my wife had to call the squad. She found me like passed out because of this bleeding issue I was having. And I was in the ICU. I was losing blood. I needed a blood transfusion, ironically, to live. But during that entire time, I was in the hospital for like a week. Not even my own dad texted me. I got no contact from my family. And this is all because I posted my face on YouTube. So, like, ultimately, it was a really important journey for me to go through because I needed to see for myself what this organization does to people. And it was devastating and horrible. But at the same time, it was kind of, I think, an important thing to go through to see exactly how shunning affects people,
Jake, that's an excellent point. And I think that is probably the most important aspect about Jehovah's Witnesses, that non-Jehovah's Witnesses need to know and understand. The reason why is because as a Jehovah's Witness, we have, one of the things that we did, we created a persona that we presented to all of our fellow co-workers. We presented a persona to all of our neighbors and people who knew us and they were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And the persona that the typical Jehovah's Witness has is a very good persona. Mr. Johnson down there, he's a good man. He's a Jehovah's Witness, but he's a good man. In fact, he went to tell us, I think, at that Kingdom Hall down there they go to. And so you'll hear people make those statements. But there's a part about Mr. Johnson that they will not believe. And what it is what you just described. Mr. Johnson has a son, 22 years old, laying in the hospital about to die. And he won't even pick up the phone, call. He won't even stop by. That's the part that people need to know before they get involved with Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is where the game changer comes in at. If people knew these things about Jehovah's Witnesses when they're standing on their door, then they're able to ask them this question. Let me ask you a question, sir. You have a son who goes to your church, but he decides, I want to go to Mount Nebo. No, I want to go to Mount Calvary up here. How would you treat him? How would you and your family and the rest of the folks down at your church, what got Kingdom Hall, how would they treat this young man who decided he wanted to go to Mount Calvary? He go every Sunday. In fact, he's in the choir. He's doing real good in the church. How would your church now treat him? And this is what Jehovah's Witnesses are not asked at the doors. See, witnesses have, we have all these questions that we are, for years, reasoning from the scriptures. We were prepared. But now with the internet and people like yourself telling these types of stories and personal experiences, man, people now can formulate the right questions to ask a witness who knocks on their door. And that is just, and like you said, it helped you to solidify in your mind, do my parents love this company out of New York more than they love me? That's profound. That's profound.
Yeah. I really like the way that you illustrated that. It's really true. And it's, of course, if you start studying with witnesses, they don't lead with that. They're not going to lead with, now you're going to have to probably cut off all your non-witness family members. And, if you leave, then we'll shun you. But they're going to save that for later. And I went through the newest witness study book that they released on the channel a couple months ago. And they don't introduce the concept of the faithful and discreet slave until the chapter after baptism. So all of the negative stuff, they backfill that. They're going to front load you with all of these really appealing teachings about a paradise earth and how to have a happy family life and Jesus and just all of these really appealing teachings that anybody would probably be on board with. And that's all the stuff that you're filling your head with as a witness for the most part. You're concentrating on those things. And all of this other stuff is just kind of this unfortunate side effect. And but over the course of a study, you are slowly eroding your typical human sense of right and wrong and replacing that with a prescribed sense of what supposedly God's discipline is. And it may not sound loving, but that's because we're imperfect and our understanding is not as good as God's. So you can't trust your own sense of love that you have for your child. Satan's going to use that against you. So it's very warped, but it is easy for a lot of people to overlook. And it's something that, folks like us face when we're trying to warn other people about this group, because most people know somebody or knows somebody who knows somebody in their life who's a witness, and they just know them as somebody who's really nice because they're not seeing that aspect where, I haven't talked to my daughter in about 15 years because she doesn't believe in my religion anymore. They're not going to tell you that when they knock on your door for the first time.
That's exactly right. We often have stated, many times on our channel that, and I have looked, I have not found anything. And if there's someone who's watching this video right now and you know something, please let us know. But I have never seen any publication that we actually study with people in their homes as part of the Bible study program, where the judicial process is discussed, helping them to understand, oh, by the way, we have a judicial process. It's an internal tribunal where those who violate what we consider as God, they don't have that. They don't have that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
They don't have that.
And the disfellowshipping process is only ever described as something for unrepentant sinners. So you think, well, I'm always going to repent for my sins, so that's not going to apply to me.
Yeah, well, they always tell people. I remember growing up and having friends that were, witnesses, and they got disfellowshipped and stuff. And I would be talking to their mother or their father, and they would say stuff like, they know what they need to do.
Yeah.
They need
Yes.
they know they need to come back to Jehovah. They know what that means. And the people who are being disciplined, they believe that. And they follow that. They don't look at it like saying, oh, they don't look at it and say, hey, look, this religion is crazy and these rules are not, they don't make any sense. They say, I know what I got to do to get back in the fold.
Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes so ingrained. I mean, for us, doing the activism for us has probably been the most enlightening thing in terms of just how ingrained this stuff is, man. I mean, people have been in this fellowship 10, 20, 30 years.
Mm.
And when you talk to them, it sounds like they was just this fellowship yesterday. I got to get myself together. Well, what did you do? Oh, I did so. Well, they don't teach that no more. Oh, they changed that? Yeah, they changed that, man.
Yeah, right.
They changed. Yeah. They didn't give you a call. They didn't give me a call. I mean, it's just crazy stuff, man. It's Looney Tunes, man. Looney Tunes.
Yeah, man, that's true though. Like, imagine living a life of just self-flagellation for 20 years because of something you did, and just thinking every day that you deserve to feel that way.
Yeah.
Or some of the crimes that people think that they've committed.
Yeah.
And when they would tell us what they did, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it'd be like, well, we've been gone for so long that we realize that it's crazy.
Yeah.
But if you were still in this religion believing that, you think this is a serious crime.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, people like the alternative service, they changed the alternative service where you can take the little job instead of going to jail. I mean, there are people who left the organization and it was this fellowship, and of course nobody ever told them, and they had no idea that I got treated like like a dog for all these years, and then they unchanged the rule. Yeah, they changed the rules, man. I mean, it's not
crazy.
Funny. It's not funny, but I'm just saying it's just, man, it's just crazy.
One guy, do you know that one guy got in touch with me and we were talking, and he actually said that he didn't know this, but he actually went and joined the National Guard or something.
Yeah.
And that's why he got disfellowshipped. So that's what I'm saying when I say that people, they basically committed a crime. When I say committed a crime, I'm talking about a crime against Watchtower's jurisdiction, their rulership and stuff. But I was like, I'm familiar with that, with not being able to work on a military base. I understand the whole thing, but he didn't know that he wasn't supposed to do that. And so he ended up getting disfellowshipped.
That reminds me of something that you said, JT. I think I was watching this video when I was waking up, maybe, but getting involved in politics was always something that I was like struggling with, like feeling like I should, but I know I'm not supposed to, and all that. And I remember one of you guys saying, like, nobody who runs for president thinks that they are supplanting Jesus as king. Like, nobody thinks that they are running for president so that you can vote for them instead of God's kingdom. Like, that's not what anybody's thinking. And so it's crazy to be like, well, we don't get involved because there's only one kingdom that we support. And it's like, well, nobody's saying that you have to do this instead. Oh, hi, look, my cat's got something to say into the microphone here. Come on. Enough out of you. And that really hit me, because I was like, wait, that's a good point. It's not like I'm doing this and it's like, well, it's either God or the president of the United States of America. Like, that's not how anybody thinks. And so, but you have just been told that that's reasonable. And everything that they say, for the most part, is backed up with a scripture of some kind. And there was something that was kind of interesting about this new publication that they released. And I think it's kind of like at the bottom of the very first page. It's like, as you're studying this publication, look up the referenced verses and see if it lines up with what you are reading. Not see if it is true and not look at the context, but look if the scripture lines up with like the sentence. Because obviously they're always going to choose something that seems like it fits, that seems like it has something to do with what they're talking about. But what they don't want you to do is look up the contexts and to do any kind of critical thinking or reasoning for yourself. They're going to tell you how you're supposed to reason it out. And you got to shake that mentality.
Yeah, context often kills the Watchtower.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you something, Jake, and
sure.
and if you don't want us to put this in, that's just let us know, or go as far as you want to go. The question I like to ask Jake is, and I think that you can share something for a lot of people in our audience, and that is the challenge a person may face if their spouse doesn't recognize the same thing that they recognize about the organization. What can you say to those in our audience? And we have a lot of people, they contact us, we talk to them, who may find themselves in a very similar situation.
Yeah. People in my audience probably know that, I'm married to an active witness, and that is very, and I don't talk about, her business or anything on the channel or anything like that. And it's way more common than people think, because it isn't something that a lot of people want to talk about. And it's obviously, like everything in life, there is nuance. That is not what we're taught as witnesses. Everything is very black and white. You are either on the side of Jehovah or you're on the side of Satan. But that's not how real life is. Real life is complicated and nuanced. And, we were talking ahead of time. It's very normal in real life to have mixed faith marriages. This happens all the time. There are many Catholics married to Protestants, or, there are people who are, practice Islam, who are married to Jewish people. It's normal. And sometimes that disagreement, adds a little bit of fun to the marriage, just because they don't have to agree on everything, and they can have interesting conversations. And that can be true for you. And I think everybody knows this. And as a witness, you know that there exists couples with mixed faith marriages, but you just think, well, that is unreasonable, because either they love Jehovah or they don't. I know that one of the things that, and when I first woke up and was questioning, the first person I went to was my wife. And that was the first person I ever expressed anything to. It was the first time I'd ever said any of this out loud. I had all these thoughts in my head, but they were just swirling around in my head. And I went to her. And what I wish I would have done is I wish I would have been more honest about where I was at every step of the process. Because we have a really, really healthy relationship now, and we're very honest and open about everything. But when you are questioning, there is you have to protect yourself, and you can't always be open and honest, because if you tell, your buddy who's an elder that you don't believe in 1914 anymore, they're going to yank you in the back room and be like, whoa. So I think you can trick yourself into thinking that you have to be sneaky about stuff, that you can't be open and honest about how you feel, but your partner is supposed to be your best friend. And if that ends up not being true, then you need to know that. You need to know that this marriage isn't going to work, because the witness aspect is critical, and that needs to be there. But you might find out, if you're honest, that your love is deeper than that, and that they realize that you haven't changed fundamentally as a human being. Your faith has changed, or might be lost completely. Maybe you don't believe in God anymore. Maybe you're completely atheist, but you are still a fundamentally decent human being. And some people, the other tricky thing, and the reason why, like Exjw, mixed faith marriages often don't work, is because you get married specifically for a spiritual partner, to serve Jehovah with, quote unquote. But you might find, that this new open honesty about everything in your marriage, adds a lot to it. So I think just be honest about everything, and it's win-win, even though marital problems are the worst. It's awful. It sucks, having disagreements with your best friend and the love of your life. If you're willing to work through that, then you come out even stronger. And if you're not willing to work through it, or not able to work through it, I should say, then you also win, because you realize that this relationship isn't going to work, and you need to move on to something else, as hard as that may be. So I hope that made some kind of sense. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much, man, because, and like I said, the only reason I asked that question is because we know we have people in our audience who that is their current situation. And as with so much about this whole process of leaving this organization, it means so much to people when they can get a confirmation, regardless of what it may be, how I'm gonna deal with my mom, how I'm gonna deal with my brothers and sisters, how I'm gonna deal with somebody on my job. I'm living in a witness house. When they can hear someone who is living what they are living, it makes all the difference in the world. This is what makes the ex-Jehovah's Witness community so unique. We have this unique commonality that we all fed from the same trough, as I often say. And as a result, we often have a lot of the same problems leaving. And so we need help along the way, trying to navigate the waters sometimes. But man, thanks so much for sharing it. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. The way that like Watchtower paints these pictures literally in the publications is like a sad, poor witness wife who's just like staring wistfully out the window, praying as her drunk, husband is sleeping on the couch, who's, this is the ex-witness, or she married outside of the Lord. And, so like they always paint it as a miserable, somber thing. But the reality is not that. It doesn't have to be that. And the only thing I would say is if you are, the spouse who is waking up or has woken up, and you want your marriage to work, then, make it a priority to make it work and prove to your partner that you haven't changed like that. Like you haven't changed your love for them. You haven't changed the innate goodness that you have, step up and make sure that it's kind of the thing that Watchtower says, but in reverse. It's, try to win them over without a word, right? Like just try and be a good mate. And I think if they can see that, then they realize like, well, the way that they paint ex-witnesses or non-witnesses isn't true. And they know that innately because we meet people every day who are not witnesses, who are in happy marriages, and who have been married for decades. It does happen. The witness is not the only place in the world with happy marriages. And a part of them knows that, but I think they might need help seeing that. But again, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But don't go into it assuming that your marriage is going to fail, because it might not. You'd be surprised at the amount of people who email me and stuff and say that they're also in a mixed faith marriage and it's going well, and it can be hard at times. So don't give up on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I agree, because what is worse than being married to a person that is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or a person that used to be a witness and they're still the same person that they were when they were a witness? What is worse than that? A person who is married to another witness, they're both so-called serving Jehovah, but they're in a bad marriage.
Yes.
Excellent point. I mean, that's an excellent point. Two Jehovah's Witnesses faking that they are the happy family life on the cover of the magazine and at the assemblies, and yet their marriage is absolutely in the toilet. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Absolutely.
So Jake, we want to thank you so much for sharing your story and different perspective. And like you said, coming from a millennial and looking at life differently, because I mean, you are in a different religion than what we were brought up in. We were not brought up in the same religion as you were, even though they both carry the same name, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, so much has changed over the years. Hey, man, thanks for taking the time, sharing your personal experience, and I hope our audience enjoyed what you had to say, and picked up some things that they might be able to apply in their own lives. So that's what makes it work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. So this has been Lady C.
And this has been JT.
And we'll see you on the next episode.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.